You can use scope to improve your leadership, both for yourself and your team. The perspective the scope chart provides can be invaluable in illustrating the issues you face and as a source of development for your team. Let me show you how. This is the 6th video in my series on scope, the perspective of your role in the organization. We're looking at scope through the scope chart that I introduced in the first video in this series. If you missed that first video, you might want to start there. Let's use the scope chart to look at being a leader. One of the common mistakes of leaders is to become myopic, to focus in one direction or another, up or down. This can lead to neglect or more dire consequences. It looks like this on the scope chart. Some managers focus most or all of their attention up, to their boss or more senior leaders. Often the reason is personal, to elevate their own career. This upward view manifests itself in some ugly ways. Sometimes the upward focus is that of a sycophant or a suck-up, a lapdog to senior leadership whose entire attention is placed on being at the service to their every need, bowing to their every wish. The hope is that this obedience will afford them a path to a promotion. In fact, that's rarely the case. People who play their upward focus in this way are usually seen as useful tools, but never as strategic partners. As such, they're rarely promoted to positions of influence, only to positions of service. They get the executive assistant role, never the executive role. Another form this upward focus can take is the manager who carefully controls their upward perception. They worry constantly about how they and their team are perceived. They go to extraordinary lengths to present an ideal image to senior leadership. Here, too, the goal is usually to seem such an outstanding leader as to warrant a rapid promotion. One way in which this behavior manifests itself is in strict control of the information flow upward. They insist that only they communicate to people above them. They control who has access or appears in front of senior leaders. They have strict email rules. They insist on reviewing, editing, revising everything that senior leaders might ever see. They deeply interrogate anyone on the team who has even the slightest interaction with senior leaders. The result is that they only expose the positive information. Everything is always rosy on their team. They delay or never actually report anything negative. It's all rainbows and puppies here, don't worry about us. The result, however, is that senior leaders get suspicious. Nothing is ever perfect, and anyone who tells you it is hiding something. The first reaction is to discount the manager and their overly rosy reports entirely. Sometimes it's so bad that it makes senior leadership feel the need for further personal investigation to check if the reports are true. Soon they do a deep dive review to understand. When the inevitable truth is learned that things aren't all wonderful, it's the manager who is exposed. It's never a good look. Lastly, one inevitable casualty of the entirely upward focus is a lack of attention on the team. They not only feel neglected, but they also feel unheard. The team never gets a voice. Their opinions and concerns are never taken seriously. In a complex decision, only senior management is heard. These managers who only focus up are not good advocates for their team to upper management, and the team pays a price. All of this is tragic since a high-performance team is its own advertisement. A team that is outstanding and productive will produce great results. Those alone will get the recognition the manager so desperately strives for. If the manager only focused on the results and less on the appearance of them, they'd get that promotion soon enough. In short, an entirely upward focus is myopic and detrimental to everything the manager is looking for. It's bad for the team, and it's bad for them. The same is true, but in different ways, for managers whose entire focus is downward, solely toward the team. This behavior is common in people who were recently promoted from within the team. They align so closely with their former peers that they neglect the upward perspective, to both their and the team's detriment. One way this problem surfaces is through micromanagement. Managers who only look down always find something about which to complain. Some detail is overlooked, some issue seemingly sidestepped. "I wouldn't have done it that way," they say, and step in to assure it's done their way. Micromanagement is a problem almost every leader has faced on both sides at least once in their career. Almost everyone has had a boss who's too controlling, too overbearing to just let you get the job done. The scope chart highlights one way to address micromanagement. In my experience, a leader who takes a more holistic view of their job is rarely a micromanager. They focus up and down in equal measure with enough time left to do their own job. With all these areas of focus, they simply don't have the time to be a micromanager. Another important effect of downward focus is the lack of a strategic perspective. We discussed this last time in the video on using scope to be strategic. A team needs a leader, someone who is thinking strategically about the team's needs. If they're entirely focused down, strategy falls by the wayside. The scope chart is a clear illustrator. On the organizational axis, a downward focus is evident. If you're just looking down, who's looking across the company to ensure the team is working well with the division or the larger group? Who's paying attention to the dozens of interfaces the team will have with other functional areas of the company, with other parallel teams, with the larger organization? Who's representing the team to the division to advocate for resources like money and headcount? The same is true on the time axis. A team with a narrow focus on today and this week lacks a more strategic time perspective. Who's planning for next year and the long term? Who's advocating for the team in the budget process? Who's peering ahead for the roadblocks or other perils? If the focus is always down into the team, the answer is no one. So in many ways, a downward focus is just as bad as an entirely upward focus, and the manager who falls into that trap is making similar mistakes. Like so many things in life, the key is balance, and the scope chart indicates that brilliantly. When it comes to leading others, using scope and the scope chart can be a good career development tool. Using the scope graph is a great way to point out shortfalls in performance or perspective and help people grow into more senior roles. For example, if you have an employee who wants to grow into a more senior role, even within their current position, from junior to senior, for example, you can use scope to illustrate it. On the organizational axis, a junior person has a fairly internal view of their role. They want to master the skills and the tools of that role. They tend to focus on themselves and their job. To be a senior person, even within the same role, requires not only mastery of that role, but also a more outward focus. Moving up ever so slightly on the organizational axis. They need to worry about how their role interfaces with other peers in the same role, to pay attention to how their role interfaces with other roles on the team for the desired outcome. And they need to serve as teachers or mentors to others in their role. All of this can be seen as inching up on the organizational axis to a larger and larger view of themselves in the organization. The same is true on the time axis. A junior person is entirely focused on getting things done now, getting the job done today or this week. Moving to a senior role requires them to think a little further down the road, to look ahead at the next thing on the list, to think about how you can tackle things in a more time-efficient manner, to participate in planning and budgeting for the team. Here again, they're inching out on the time axis, taking a longer-term view of their role. Movement in both of these directions is seen as being more strategic, and you as a leader can guide people to be more strategic by prompting them to think in these ways. by giving them opportunities to participate across the team, with other teams, and on longer-term planning and budgeting. You can help them to grow to be more strategic simply by exposing them to these dimensions. And you can use this scope chart as a way to do that. Assuming they do demonstrate growth in these areas, you can use the scope chart as a way to help both you and they understand their position. And you can use it to help chart their growth. You can ask questions specifically on these two axes. How have you been working up on the org axis? Have you been working with others or mentoring others in the group? Are you thinking about things broader on both the organizational and the time dimensions? These are questions you can use to help form your opinion about whether someone is ready to be promoted. Ask yourself if you've seen their growth in these dimensions. Ask yourself what the bar in either dimension should be. Should they be interacting with the division, or is just within the team enough? Is thinking about this year enough, or should they be taking a multi-year view? These are ways of thinking about the strategic perspective and their growth, and using them to decide if they're worthy of promotion. Every promotion is taking a chance. You're making a bet on that person. Using the view of scope and the scope chart as a prompt or a guide can help you feel more confident about making that bet. In the next video, we'll take this use of perspective to the hiring and promotion process, using the same kind of use of scope and the scope chart to help understand hiring requirements. That's next time. Be sure to subscribe to my channel and click the bell so you won't miss each new video in this series. I'll see you in the next one using scope in hiring.